A few moments later.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 no. I don't know why she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, fussy, fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she jumping up.
So I am back, guys. I was trying to do a live and Flo would not let me be great. Flo decided that my internet speed doesn't matter right now, so the video was dropping out and glitching out and pausing and giving me stress. So I decided for now I'm going to just record this as a video and post it so you guys can see. One of the reasons that I'm doing this today is because as passionate as I am about music and production and computers and all these things, you know, I'm an IT guy as well, you know, but I'm also passionate about teaching. And one of the reasons for that is understanding that when we help others, when we share advice, when we, you know, we be that guide for people, it helps them to deal with life. It helps them to be better. It helps them to be inspired, you know. So I go around sharing my knowledge and my experience. Most of the times it's be one-on-one. If I see somebody struggling, I will help them out. If I'm asked a question, hey, what do you use? I'm gonna tell you, like, you know, because I learned from some of the greatest. I've been fortunate enough to travel to over 70 countries around the world. Being in the band Crossfire, that opened the doors to traveling, and when the band wasn't doing stuff, I would go around to the studios. I would go around and, you know, try to connect with the other musicians in different bands and different genres of music, you know, reggae, jazz, gospel, whatever, while I'm in New York, and in other places around the world. When the band ain't doing anything, I would also go around to different places and travel around to learn, to absorb, to see if I can learn something from people that are greater than me. And there's always going to be someone that is greater than you. There's always going to be someone that is starting out that may need a little help, a little nudge, and you can be that person for them. And likewise, somebody can help you be better. So that's how life's supposed to go, right? You know, scientists and stuff, they would see a bird flying and observe the bird and say, hey, this gives me inspiration. Let me try to be a bird. Let me attach wings to myself and try to jump off a cliff. That didn't work out, right? But yeah, then they decided, okay, let me try to create a box and put wings on it. And now we have airplanes. Basically, we replicated the bird and made it our own and added Wi-Fi to it and all these different things, you know. So that's the intent of life: to observe, to share, and to create things, and to help people to be better and make life easier. So this is me making your life easier. So the first thing I tell people all the time, people always ask me, Corey, Starway, CJ, how you get your vocals to sound so crisp? Like everything in the mix is so clean. How can you hear everything? So I'm gonna start with the vocals first, because the vocals are the most important part of the song. The vocalist is what connects with the person first. The lyrics, you know, the vibe, the energy, the spirit, the soul of the vocalist is what touches people more so. The music does too, but the music is support for the vocalist, right? So get the vocals right, and anything else can happen after. So today we have Peter Ram on the Island Flavor Rhythm. I played a bit of it before. Right, I'm not live, so I don't need to do that. So I tell people all the time, get a clean source. Always try to get the cleanest and best possible source that you can get. That starts with the singer. You know, make sure the singer is in a good mood. Make sure they got water. Make sure that, you know, you help them be as comfortable as possible in the session. You know, notice things, be an observer, ask questions, you know, try to figure out what you can do to make the vocalist as comfortable as possible so they can perform as best as possible. So that's number one. Number two, is the recording source. Which microphone are you going to use? Do you have more than one microphone? You know, if the vocalist sounds a little bright, a little sharp on the vocals, some mics, some vocalists have like a that kind of noise, the S's and stuff, and the T's and the P's and stuff, is be very sharp because that's how their voice sounds. Everybody has a different vocal tone, right? So a different microphone might sound better on the vocalist. So if you find that, use your ears, always reference, you know, listen to all the great songs that inspire you from some of the greatest mixers and some of the greatest singers and stuff. And you know, you love something about this song. You know, it's not just about the lyrics, it's not just about the chords that are being played. It's also about how it was recorded, you know, how the emotions are brought out in the mix based on what frequencies are there, you know. So always try to get a good source, and then from there is just a little bit of mojo, a little bit of magic in the mix. But no matter what gear you have, whether you have Pro Tools, whether you have Logic, use what you have and just do your best. You know, I've done songs in my bedroom, in the living room, outside in the garage, cars passing, dogs barking, and they're some of the greatest hits in the world, in Barbados, in the Caribbean. So let nothing stop you. Just always do your best and try to figure out how to get it done, right? So I'm using Pro Tools here, and I'm using mostly Waves plugins I use. I also use Plugin Alliance a lot, stuff like this. Brainworks. This is a mastering limiter. I'll tell you and show you more of that a little bit later. I use a lot of Slate plugins as well, but mostly Waves. Waves is generally have everything that you need, and as long as you know how to use them right, you will get the sound that you want, right? So the first thing I do after getting a clean vocal is I go to Autotune. No, my bad. Before I even do that, I do something called meloding. So for the entire vocal, I would set the entire vocal. Here I'm just going to do a little part. I would right click and I would go to where is it? ARA plugins, Melodyne. Focus. Melodyne. It will ask me because I did it already, and I already have it in polyphonic mode, which is for timing if I want to quantize the vocal. More on that in another class. Commit. Yeah, I'm gonna commit. So Melodyne is gonna give me all the individual notes for the singer.
I don't know what she getting on. I don't.
And give me a visual representation of what is going on. So there's a setting that you can set it where when you press a note, when you touch a note with the mouse, it will actually sound the key and the pitch of that note.
I don't.
So I don't know, right? I can come in and change this note. I can. So he would sing this instead.
I don't know what she getting on.
As opposed to.
I don't know what.
So normally the changes are not that drastic. Peter Ram is a seasoned singer. He sang this pretty good. Just D, I think, recorded these vocals for me and in Peter Ram's home studio, and then he synced the vocals to me, and they were pretty well recorded. Hats off to you, Just D. Good job. And from there, I went through the entire song, and even the best vocals in the world, sometimes they go a little bit off. Sometimes they're a little bit off. So you just have to, let me hold on the Alt key. Sometimes you will shift the notes slightly where you need it to be. But don't listen to it in solo. Listen to it with the music because it has to match back with the music. All right? And trust your ears. You'll know when it feels right. And if you don't trust your ears, trust your body. If you use your body also picks up things. And, you know, when you get like that gut feeling or you get goosebumps or whatever, when it feels good in your body too. If you focus on how your body feels, Your body is also a great indicator of when things are right, especially for the lower frequencies, right? So that's that. So after I do melody for the entire song, then I go into auto-tune. Now auto-tune is, I have to reinstall the pro version. This is just the basic version right now. My pro version kind of glitched out. I think I have to update the plugin, but for now I'm going to use this. This is actually what I used on the song actually. So I usually have it on the slowest setting, which is roughly, if you use Auto-Tune Pro or like the pitch shifter in Logic, the pitch correction, sorry, in Logic, this setting I believe is probably around maybe 70 milliseconds. Medium is probably around maybe 20 or 25 milliseconds, I believe. And this would be like the Justin Bieber setting, the Rihanna setting, for the most part. And fast would be the TPN setting, sound robotic, you know, artificial. And I think this is set at probably maybe 5 ms or 0. I will have to check the manual. That's another thing about these plugins, they have manuals. So if you don't know this particular, oh yeah, settings, no, help. If I click, no, that again, open the website. That ain't what you want. But you could get it there too. But normally when you click the menu and the plugin is have the manual there. Most of the ways plugins do it. Let me show you an example quickly. Kramer Play. This is a very nice compressor that they use. I'm going to show you that soon. If you go to here and you click here and you go down, user manual, look at that, and click that, you have a whole heap of information here where you can learn about this thing, what it does, how it works. Read the manuals, guys. They're there for a reason. If you don't want to read the manual, just use your ears. After auto-tune, I go into, right, let me go back to auto-tune. So the humanize is basically, sometimes depending on how the vocalist transitions from one note into the next, it can sound a little auto-tuney. It can sound a little artificial, robotic, even though you have this on the slowest setting. So what this humanize does is it allows vibrato to pass through a bit without being affected so much, because some vocalists have a lot of vibrato. So if it's set on off and they have a lot of vibrato, it's going to start to try to control that vibrato.
I don't know what she getting on.
It's going to try to control that vibrato and sound a little funny sometimes. So for Peter Ram, he doesn't really have that much vibrato as some other vocalists. So I would just leave it on min. In the Auto-Tune Pro or in your whatever tuning program you're using, there's Waves Tune real time. There is a few free ones online as well. They usually have a setting for the humanize or, you know, or vibrato. They have a vibrato setting. You will have to read the manual to see different terms and different plugins. In Auto-Tune, it's called humanize, and Auto-Tune Pro is called flex pitch or flex tune, I believe. And I think they also have a humanize button or vibrato button, and you can set it. There are different numbers you can use. This one is simplified, so if you don't want to use numbers, you got slow, medium, and fast. Just simple to understand. Slow is around 70, 80 ms. Medium is probably around 20 ms, 25 or so, maybe 30. Fast, I believe, is either 0 or maybe 5 or 10. Probably 5. So yeah, that's that. Set this back slow. So what's gonna happen, you're gonna set the key, and the key is going to basically be the key of the song. If you don't know the key of the song, ask a musician, get on the keyboard, play the scale. If the scale fits back and it sounds good, you know that's a key. And this song is in F sharp major, but I already knew that because I'm in the keyboardist. You have minor, you have chromatic. All chromatic is that it will still fix the notes, because sometimes a vocalist can sing an F and they'll be dead in the center of the F, but it can sing an F and it can also be closer to the E and a little bit closer to E. It's still an F, but it's a flat F. So sometimes for some songs, if the key changes or if there's a key, what you call a transition, a passing chord or a passing phrase, what happens is if you set it on chromatic, it might work a little better. So you gotta experiment here, guys. Just use what sounds right to the ears, do the research, and you'll be good to go. Now into the fun part. Now this plugin here, CLA Vocals, I use this a lot. Now before I would add maybe five or six plugins to get a vocal to sound proper, right? Get it to sound expensive. But what I found with this plugin here, by Crystal Algae, this plugin basically makes my life easier. It sounds fantastic. Don't sleep on it. I basically come in on the default preset. There are a lot of presets that you can choose. Some will work with different genres, as you can see. There's rock, female. You got male. You got different other producers, settings, and you know, you choose things and you see what sounds good. Sometimes you miss and click something and it gives you a freaky effect, and you're like, whoa, that's cool, that sounds cool, and you keep it. But I came in on the default preset, which I like to start. I don't usually use a lot of templates. I like to do everything from scratch because each song and each voice is different. It's never a one size fit all, right? It's like a shoe. Everybody got a different size, you know. So gain staging. When I come into the plugin, I'm hovering around the midpoint. I'm also looking at the input gain stage lights, and generally I will be in the green area. You don't want to be too low, you don't want to be too high, unless that's the desired effect you want. Usually when you go high, you get distortion and aggressiveness, and when you're lower, you get smooth sounding vocals, right? So if you watch the gain staging,
I don't know what she getting on. Happy.
it's generally in the green. And just like analog gear, if you hit it right, if the input source goes into the device correctly, it works the way it's supposed to work. So gain staging is super important. It's something that I do at every stage of the mix. Sometimes after plugins, I will add a trim plugin or a gain plugin to either raise the volume or lower the volume going into the plugin so that things aren't overloaded or underloaded, right? The first thing I do is I set this bass knob, which is the lower frequency in the vocals, like down in there, right? I like to do the lower because it touches the frequencies that are important. Sub will kind of work for bass voices, or you could tweak that a little bit more, but 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna leave it on lower. Sometimes I might go upper depending on the voice. Sometimes for female vocalists, because they sing higher, they can sing higher and their tone is a little bit higher. Usually, sometimes I will put it on upper and then tweak that. But normally in a vocal, you don't need all these bass frequencies, so I kind of pull out that a bit. Here I'm dropping out about maybe 5 decibels from Peter's voice. Stuff that's not needed, stuff that is going to compete with like the bass guitar, compete with the guitar, compete with the snare drum, and you don't want things fighting in the mix. One of the reasons why my mixes sound so clean is because I always carve in space, right? So here I'm carving space for the vocals to shine and not make the bass man miserable or the drummer miserable, right? So here on the top end now, and as it says top, it's adding like sizzle, like that high end, what you would call it, maybe squeaky voice in a way. The brilliance of the voice, the expensive sound of the voice is where the top is, or the roof. For Peter's voice, topped worked for me, and for some people I will be on bite, which is more a little bit lower down in the range, kind of like mid highs, starting at mid highs I should say, because I believe the curves on this thing are not sharp, it's kind of whitish, sort of like how a Pultec equalizer will work. For those of you who know what a Pultec is, basically it is boosting and cutting with a wider band in a wider range. It's affecting more frequencies than affecting less frequencies, right? So I use top, and this is the compress, and I usually keep it on spank. For more aggressive music, I would use wall, like rap, you know, punk, that kind of stuff. For jazz and that kind of thing, I just give it a little push. For R&B, a little push. Soca, you know, soca is power, you know. So I use spank here. And this is the reverb. I'm not using the reverb here because it doesn't always work for the song. I like to manually set my reverbs. Sometimes this could be useful. Let me show you what it sounds like.
I don't know what she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, fussy, fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy.
So that's what that sounds like. I didn't like it for this song, so I turned it off. You just click until it goes off. It isn't lit, it's off. And I also pull it down as well, just in case anything goes wrong. Because if it is on, you're not going to hear it really.
I don't know what she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy.
So when it's turned down, if you make a mistake and you leave it on and you forget, it wouldn't be too bad, right? I'm using the slap here. This is a delay. A slap delay is like an echo. Like when you go into a cave and you clap, or you say, you know, you shout and you hear the song echoing like, hey, 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 like that. That's what delay is, and that's what delay does. I'm using a slap delay, so it's like a slight little echo. Let me show you what that sounds like.
I don't know what she getting on. Happy, happy.
Almost like if there are two Peter Rams talking at the same time, but not in perfect sync.
I don't know what she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, fussy, fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she jumping up. You can see she fussy, she walking up. You can see she fussy, she belting waist. You can see she fussy, all in your face. You can see she fussy, like she studying me, then she push it back on me.
And that's how that works. So when you hear them effects on a song, usually is the engineer doing this manually, or you can also automate it on the track itself and make copies. You can make copies and put it on a track with the effect, paste it, and you will get the echo. So that's how that works. And I'm not using the width. This makes the vocal song a little bit more expensive. It spreads it a little bit of it in the left speaker and a little bit of it in the right speaker, and it's also playing in the center, in the middle, right? Up front, stage, and center where the vocalist should be anyway. But sometimes you got backup vocalists on the side of the stage or whatever. So this is kind of like that. It basically creates a copy of his main vocal and sends a little bit to the left speaker and the right speaker. But what it sends to the left speaker and the right speaker is slightly modulated in that the pitch is slightly different. And on one side, there might be something going on that's not going on the right side, on the left side. So what happens is it gives a wide effect. It stretches the vocal out, you know, and makes it sound a little bit more expensive. I'm not using that here. I didn't think this song called for it, so that's off as well. But when you use this, always use it sparingly. Just a little touch sometimes works, does wonders. Okay, so if I turn this on and off, you will realize what it's doing to his voice. Let me solo it so you can hear it better. And it might help if I actually go back to the...
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 no. I don't know why she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy.
So when I turn it on, for those of you that are using earphones, you'll be able to hear that the vocal got brighter. If you're using headphones or earphones or a decent speaker system, or you got an expensive iPhone 15, 16, 17, you would hear the difference. So that's what that is doing, making the vocal a little bit more present in the mix. It is making it sound expensive and shiny. From there, I'm going into one of my favorite compressors, and this is the Kramer Pi from Waves. And what this compressor does for me, it to me it sounds like somewhat like a LA2A, a Teletronics LA2A, a UAD LA2A. For those of you that know what that is, it's basically an optical compressor, and it makes the vocals sound even more expensive. It controls when the vocals gets loud and gets soft, and it makes them sound more even in the song, so that when they do sing soft, like for example here, as you can see here, this is what you call a waveform. So this is kind of fatter than right here. So basically it tells me that Peter Ram sang louder here and he sang softer here. But because there's music playing behind him, when he sings here, you might hear him well, but then when he sings this, it might not be heard so well. So what the compressor does is it makes this sound like this. It doesn't look that way here, but after coming through this, it will basically look even all across the board. So this is what that is doing. It's not always constantly on. It's just catching the peaks. It's actually turning down this. It's actually turning down this part and raising this part so that it looks more uniform, more even, right? So that it sounds more even. So I basically start with default presets all the time. You have presets in here if you don't know what's going on. You can click, choose lead vocal. There's some for drums and different things, but sometimes I would put a snare drum compressor on a vocal, on a voice. You know, sometimes I put a kick drum compressor on a bass guitar or keyboard. You know, there are no rules. You know, use what sounds good to your ears and what feels good to your body. And that's what I will tell you guys. So this is what this is doing.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, no. I don't know why she...
So you can see on Peter Ram's loudest voice parts, the compressor is hitting around -3 gain reduction, right? I try not to go past -2, -3 on the loudest parts of the vocals. If you go all the way down in here, what happens is the vocal sounds thin. It starts to sound squash, and it starts to sound more computerized, you know, more artificial, and that's not what you want. You want people to really feel it and the energy, so you don't want to squeeze it too much. You don't want to stifle it too much. So that's what that does. So because I set the threshold to...
But all I can see is that she fussy. You go see she fussy. You go see she fussy.
Because I set the threshold to give me -3 dBs decibels gain reduction, I'm also adding that back on the output. Here I have it set at 6 dBs. I don't know why I did that, but it worked. Normally what you take off, you put back on. So generally it should be +3, but I use +6. And I think I probably did that because I wanted more gain going into the next series of plugins. That's probably why I did that. The analog noise, this is just noise. There's a 50 hertz cycle. Like for those of you that are electricians or whatever, or know electronics, you would know that there's a 50 hertz cycle and there's a 60 hertz cycle. And all that is noise. It's like a hum. So this would make this compressor mimic the actual real compressors that you see in the studios, the real devices with the real knobs that's been wrapped up together. It would give off a sound, but I don't want that noise. It's not necessary, so I turn it off. It's just for fun, I guess, or if you want that. And the compression ratio, more oftentimes than not, I use a 2:1 ratio or a 3:1 ratio on vocals. You don't want it to be limiting. You don't want it to be 10:1, 8:1. Not really, unless you're going for that desired squashing effect. So 3:1 is pretty gentle. I know it sounds like a high number, but 3:1 is a gentle compression still. And the decay time is basically the recovery time for the sort of like a release time for the compressor. Basically how fast it responds to how the vocals is singing, right? So here I'm using a very fast time, which will make the compressor act faster and not slow.
Fussy, you go see she fussy. You go see she fussy. She jumping up.
but it seems like this particular setting changes how the compressor responds as well to the material. So it might be sort of changing the attack as well, and maybe a little bit of some other stuff going on under the hood. Who knows? I didn't read the manual, I just know it sounds good, and I just set it right how I want it. From there, I'm going into max bass. Now people will say, Corey, why are you putting a bass plugin on the vocals? This is a plugin for bass. Why are you doing this? Now I'll tell you why. One day I was mixing and I went to pull up a plugin. Let me show my whole host of plugins. As you can see, I got a lot of different plugins by different people. The list is very long, and all the different categories. The list is very long. So I was going through all of these plugins, still scrolling, and that's just one menu, right? And I missed and clicked the wrong thing, and this came up, max bass came up, and I was like, yo, the vocals sound fat. It was too bassy. It sounded like Barry White kind of thing going on, but I didn't want that effect. But I like what it did to the tone of the vocal. It made the vocal sound warmer. So what I did was I was like, okay, that's what it's doing, that's what's going on. Right, let me cycle through the presets and see what's going on. So I started going through different presets until I find something that worked. And I settled on PC laptop, and that sounded pretty good for me. But what I did was I came across here to the max bass setting. So the original bass is completely off, is completely turned off. These are right, and the input is at 0. That's basically the volume coming into the plugin. So just make sure that you're not clipping.
Yeah, you could say she fussy, she walking up. Look up. You could say she fussy, she belting ways.
Right. I have 2 vocal tracks because sometimes you want to do slightly different things on the vocals, or is how the vocalists sing the vocals. Because since this part is so close to this part, sometimes he wants to take a breath, sometimes she wants to take a breath before they sing. It's not always this.
You could say she fussy, she walking up. Look up. You could say she fussy, she belting ways.
Right, so that's this part here is she pelting ways, that kind of thing. So sometimes the vocals will need to take a break. So that's another recording tip. You can create a new track, and instead of having them sing the whole thing, all of that, let them sing this part first, pause, stop, rewind, and then let them cue up, and then come and sing this part. And when you do that, what happens is the vocalist has more energy for that particular phrase, so you will get a better sounding phrase. Especially if a song has a lot of words that are jumbled up together or close together. Using this technique will save you a lot of time and a lot of editing and trying to fix things after the fact. So that's a tip there for you. So after the Kramer Pi, I go into max bass. The original bass is set, I think this was normally somewhere here or something, but it was too much bass, so I kind of pulled it down. And I think I had it set right now, minus 18 or so, somewhere around there. So what this is doing is adding harmonics to Peter's voice. So sometimes when you go through analog gear, so if you don't have analog gear, or like an analog compressor or a preamp or whatever, 1073, if you don't have a Teletronics compressor, if you don't have a distressor compressor, if you don't have the top of the line stuff, and you're just going from the mic straight into the computer, or the microphone straight into the interface, this plugin is your friend. So try it, guys. Tell me how it works out for you. Max bass, PC laptop, set the max bass minus, I would say maybe around minus 20 to minus 13, but you gotta play with it because each voice is different. Some people's voice having more bass than others, and also the music in the song, you got bass guitars, you got other things competing, so you gotta set it till it sounds right. But less is more often than not. It's just a little touch. What it does is it adds harmonics which is first order, second order, third order harmonics. And harmonics are like different frequencies above or below the original that the vocalist signed. So Peter Ann might have signed around here, for example. But what analog gear would do is add more harmonics. So you see it's represented here by this graph. So this is the harmonics that's adding. If I raise the knob, you will see it goes up. So that's more harmonics, that's harmonics. Right here, we just add in a touch. And it's making his vocal song even more expensive. It's sounding nice and warm, nice and cozy, you know. And that's how these songs from the 70s and the 80s and whatnot used to sound when they use $10,000 compressors and $30,000 EQs and stuff, equalizers and whatnot. And yes, they are that expensive. So this is not quite exactly the same, but it adds a little bit of that. So that's a good one. From there, I'm going into one of the most important parts of vocal. I'm EQing the vocal with the FabFilter Pro Q4. You can use any EQ. I like this EQ. I like how it looks. I like how it sounds. It's very transparent. It doesn't color my vocal. I just want to control certain things, right? So what I'm doing is I am high passing or adding a low cut for the lower frequencies. Like this is the rumble. This is when, down in here is when the vocalists miss and stomp their feet. They miss and tap on the microphone stand, and you're hearing the rumble. They miss and tap the microphone. This is the unwanted stuff. This is when a car pass outside and you want to record your vocals and the car pass and blow the horn, not the horn, the car got a muffler on it and you hear a motorcycle, that low frequency. This will cut out a lot of that, and it's not necessary in a vocal for most songs. Unless you use Barry White or something, you don't really need a lot of this down in here. So I cut that out. It's also going to help my vocal to punch through the mix a lot better. Right here I'm using a 12 dB per octave slope. If I change that, you'll see this get sharper. Try not to EQ your vocals sharp, guys. Like if I use 48, yeah, I on the wrong thing. Let me undo that. I gotta select the thing first. If I use 48, you'll see this line change. This line will change and become sharper. You see? Try not to do this, guys. It will make your stuff sound thin, and you don't necessarily want to remove everything. You just want to let it slope off gradually, and that sounds more natural, more human, if I want to say. 96 is even sharper. So generally I try to use maybe sometimes a 6 dB per octave, or I use 12 or 18. For this particular song, I used 12 because it sounded good. It felt right in my body. So that's what I used. You can experiment, you can drag.
She walking up, look up. You can see she fussy, she parting ways. You can see.
Wrong part of the song. Let me go back to number 9, bar 9. Let me pull this up and tweak this.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, no. I don't know why she getting on. Happy, but all I can see.
So that's what that does. All right, makes the vocal sound thinner, just a little bit thinner, not too much. Right here I have it set around, focus. I have it set around, I think around 73 hertz or something like that. What I'm doing also here is adding a bit of 200. As you can see here, plus 1.6 decibels, not too much, just a touch. And all the way here, you know, it just a little oomph, because everything adds up in series, right? So the compressors, the EQs, the effects, everything adds to every other thing. So it is most of the time I'm doing subtle moves. The only reason you will have to do a move like this is if the vocal was poorly recorded, or if the equipment you used was inadequate. It wasn't suitable to the voice or the song that you're doing or whatever. You have to make drastic moves. But usually when you see you have to do this, do it over. Record it again. It means that something ain't right, you know? unless you're going for a desired effect, like deliberately. But subtle, less is more. So I was doing like 1.6, around 180, I believe. And what this is doing is adding a bit more body to his voice. It's giving it a little bit more warmth too. This is the area where you would consider like warmth, around 100 to 300. That's like warmth, right? To put it into terms. So you want your vocal to be a little warmer, add a little bit more of 200, 180, around there. Depending on the voice. For Peter's voice, they work good at 180, around there. What I'm doing here is I'm dipping some of what we call mud. In Peter's voice, for this particular vocal, like on a different day, you would get different settings, depending on the vocals, depending on what the singer ate, all these different things. If they got the cold or not, if they no recovery for the flu. Different days, different settings. So it's never one size all fits all. So here it was 295. Generally, I would tell you that most of the time it's be between 400, 500, and 250 that I would have the setting. So you got to kind of sweep and listen to figure out what's going on. So this was around what, 300-ish, 270, somewhere around there. I don't remember. When that happens, I just hit undo, set everything back where it was. So this was at 160 and this was at 295. I have it dynamic. What dynamic means is it's not constantly cutting out that frequency like this. What's happening is only when it detects that Peter's voice is high in this range, it will act. And let me show you what that looks like.
Is that she fussy, you can see she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, you can see she fussy.
So it's not acting on every single word or every single phrase. It's periodic. What happens is a lot of guys try to do this. They just EQ things, and now it's scooped out for the entire song.
Fussy, you can see she fussy.
Alright, let me turn off dynamic mode for a moment. Disable dynamics. This is what it looks like when guys do this.
She jumping up, yeah. You can see she fussy, she walking up. Look up, you can see she fussy, she parting ways.
Every time Peter sings, this is out, whether it's needed or not. So if you want to kind of clever yourself above the average guy, what you can do is set your EQs dynamic if you have a dynamic EQ. If you don't have Pro Q4 or Pro Q3, then you could use any EQ, your stock EQ. If you don't have a dynamic EQ, you don't have a choice but to cut it out. But what I did before will help a bit. The max bass is kind of helping in that region and that kind of thing. What I'm doing here in his voice for this particular vocal, maybe it could be the microphone, it could have been the room that he recorded in. There was a resonance that I'm getting at around 1300 hertz, 1.3K. So I made a little dynamic EQ here again to kind of tame that a bit.
You can see she fussy, all in your face. You can see she fussy, like she's studying me when she push it back on me. Oh.
I got Pro Tools in insertion follow playback mode. So I didn't want that. Let me go back to bar 9.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, no. I don't.
Right, so I'm taking a little bit there. And then there was an annoying frequency in his voice at 2.7, around 2.7K, 2700 hertz, roughly 2765 here. So what I would normally do is I would do this. I would play the vocal, I would solo it, and play it loud, like turn up my speakers, turn up my headphones, not to damage my ears, but I would play it loud, and I would do this.
she getting on. Happy, 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 happy. No, I don't know what she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy.
Hear that? It's a resonance. So in his voice, there was a resonance at that frequency. So I decided to just chop out a little bit of that I didn't like. And again, it's not constantly through the song. It's just being done. It's being done periodically. So this is what that looks like. And the width of it, as you can see, is very narrow. It's not wide like this. It's very narrow because I don't want to affect the other frequencies below it and above it. I just want to notch out that frequency. But I notched it out with a very thin Q. That's what the Q is. That's what the Q is called. Basically the width of how wide the effect is, right? So this is what that's doing.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 happy. No, I don't know why she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fuss.
It's not always constant and it's not always at one level. Right now is taking out roughly around -5 decibels at that particular frequency. And that just tames it. If you find you have a nasal vocalist, a very nasal sounding, you could kind of pull this around here in the mid-range between 800 to like 1.2K and kind of drop that a bit. Maybe make it a little bit wider so that they don't sound as nasal, because that's really nasal kind of heady voice is. So there you go. And then on the top end, this is the high-end sizzle. This is the expensive sound, you know. I'm just basically boosting here a bit at 1800 hertz, 18.5 kilohertz, 18,000 hertz, 2 decibels, basically 2 dBs at that frequency. It's a shelf. It's not a bell. It's a shelf. Oops. It's a shelf. And that is mimicking basically like what more expensive plugins would do, like the mic EQ, like
A few moments later.
right. So my phone died. I'm back here again. The sizzle on the top, close that out. From there, guys, I am going into the mixing bus mastering. But before we get there, let me get to the effects. So here I'm using a Valhalla, which is a reverb, and that looks like this.
I don't know why she getting on.
That effect you hear after the fact, that's what that is. Let me play it for you in solo. Ram, solo.
I don't know why she getting on.
That's that effect. So when you hear that on a song, usually the engineer is doing this and then turning it back down again. So
I don't know.
kind of disappears. If I put it wide, it sounds like this.
I don't know.
So that's what that does. The decay or the reverb time. Some people call it the decay. Some plugins call it decay. Some plugins call it reverb time or length or whatever, or room size. I'm using the default concert hall preset. Sounds pretty good to me. It's mimicking a 1970s vibe. That's what they call it, vintage. And I had that set around maybe just over a second. And the mix is 100 because it's on a send. It's not on the actual track. If I had put it on the track, like if I ran out of tracks or whatever, like back in the day when I only had 8 tracks to work with or 16, I can't afford to have a lot of auxiliary sends and returns. What I would do is put the thing on the track, but then the mix obviously has to come down to maybe sometimes it'd be 0.5% or 1% between there and 3%. And that's because it's on the vocal track, right? So you don't want to take away too much from the actual dry vocal, but it will work like this if you're using it on the as an insert on a vocal, right? So it doesn't wash away the vocal, it doesn't drown the vocal in reverb, but what it does is it gives it that nice expensive tone that you hear on the songs that you know and love. In this case, it's on a bus, it's on an auxiliary, so it's 100%. Now, I don't have any pre-delay here. Pre-delay is very important because it separates the dry voice, the vocalist, from the effect, from the reverb, the echo, the cave-like sound, the hall church-like sound. So normally, instead of guessing, because songs have something called a tempo, this particular song is at 157 BPMs, this rhythm. So, you know, you can kind of guess and do the math, or you can use your ears and feel what's right. I tend not to do that too much now. What I do is, I'm gonna show you what I do. Where is it? Valhalla. Now I have a delay plugin before my reverb. And you'd be like, but Corey, why would you put a delay plugin before your reverb? You don't want to delay the vocal. You know, you have delays. You already have delays here, stereo delay. You have a slap delay here. Why are you using a delay on the reverb? Well, this is why. The delay is basically what is another word for saying pre-delay. So the pre-delay knob on the reverb, on the Valhalla, is in milliseconds, right? So instead of calculating which milliseconds I want, I could basically set it to the song BPM. You see the 157 BPM, which is the speed of the rhythm. And more often than not, I use a 1/64th or a 1/32nd pre-delay or delay when it comes to delaying my reverbs or pre-delaying my reverbs. So I can even put this plugin on here. I can calculate my 1/32nd. Now you realize that in milliseconds, the 1/32nd is around 48 ms milliseconds, right? If I put it back at 1/64, what happens is the milliseconds will get shorter. So it's only 24. And I think it kind of needed a little bit more. So it felt better here. This worked, 64 worked, but a 30-second sounded better. It felt better. So I used that. And if you look here, you see 48. I can easily go into the reverb. Here it is. I could go into the reverb and set that pre-delay at 48 or close. So what's gonna happen is it's gonna be in time with the song. It's gonna groove with the song. That's another important thing. Don't just set your pre-delay at anything. Oh, it sounds nice. Make sure that it's in timing with the song, because that is gonna give the song more vibe and it's gonna sound pleasing, more pleasing to the people's ears, right? So to make it easier, no pre-delay on the reverb. Use a delay plugin. You can use any delay plugin. Here I'm just using H delay because I like how the interface. I like knobs. I like pretty knobs, big knobs and stuff, right? So I use this, right? So that's set at a 30-second. Now there is no kind of modulation going on. It isn't EQ'd. I'm not using a preset. It's the default mode. The phase isn't changed, nothing like that. It isn't on ping pong, just default. And all I'm doing is the MS or the BPM 30-second 64. No feedback, that's important. It's not a delay. I'm just using this to delay the reverb, so I don't need repeats. Feedback is how much times it will repeat, like an echo or like feedback. That's what feedback is. Like when the vocalist singing, you hear in the speakers, that's called feedback. What happens is they sing, it goes into the speakers, and then it goes back into the microphone, and it goes into the speakers again, and it creates an endless loop. So if I had to put this feedback here, around, hear what just happened? You got feedback. That's what's happening on the stage when the vocalists get too close to the microphone, and that's why they called it feedback. I turned off the noise. I don't need that shh analog noise in my reverb, so I turned that off. It's on 100% wet because I want the full delay effect of the effect itself, right? If I had to put it on dry, more likely than not, it would probably not do this setting. So just leave it on that, and easy does it. From there, I'm also using a second reverb. Now, some days you want to use one reverb. I tend to use sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 reverbs in one song, because you get different colors, right? So I'm using a plugin by Waves called Mani. I'm using Mani's reverb here. Again, is on the preset. I kind of set the one that I want. It's small, so it's not really, the time is not really that big. And there's no pre-delay because I already have that with the Valhalla, so I don't need 2 pre-delays working against each other. And everything is flat, right? So that's that. Again, a little bit of that in the mix. The level is very low.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 happy. No,
See how low my meters are? It ain't up in here, it ain't up in there. It's just a little color, it's just a little touch. You don't want the song wash away in reverb, right? So that's that. From there, I'm doing tape slap, and these are only on the vocals. These effects are only, the vocals are being synced to these auxiliary buses, right? So I have this bad boy here, Kramer tape, and this is actually when I'm actually using a preset. I am using the 7.5 IPS vocal slap. Vox stand for vocals, and it's basically a delay slap, like an echo, right? 7.5 IPS, what that means is it tape speed. That's how fast the tape is spinning, I believe. If it ain't that, is the tape size or something like that. But what it does is 7.5 will kind of soften it. It will make it more warmer. It will not be as bright. I don't need the reverb to be bright or the echo to be bright, so I use 7.5. The speed, right? Correct, that's the speed. So 15 IPS or IPS would give you, the tape would spin faster, and that will result in a brighter song. I don't need my effect to be bright in this case, so 7.5 IPS setting preset worked for me. And that's basically it. Again, always make sure there's no noise. You don't want no noise in the thing. So turn that completely off, and everything else sounds good. And again, that is just doing a little bit, just a little touch.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, happy.
You gotta use your ears. And then from there, I'm also sending the vocal to a stereo delay. So what this is doing is in the left speaker and the right speaker, it is doing a different note. So in the left speaker, I have an echo that is on this note, right? Which is 382 milliseconds. And then on the right speaker, I have it doing this note, which is 191.1 ms. What that is doing is 100% of that, and the vocal is being synced to that and returned to the master, right? So what this is doing is giving me slight little echoes in the left and the right speaker to make the voice sound a little bit vibey, you know, what I like to call ear candy, make it sound even more expensive. So you will find this on like a Rihanna voice. Rihanna likes to do this a lot. She uses a lot of delays on her voice or voices, left right, differences in left right timing, delays on her voice, and that's a thing for her. So I did it in this song, and then I am reverbing that delay because I don't want that delay in my face. I don't want it at the front of the mix. I want it in the back of the mix. I want it in the back of the room. I don't want it saying no in the first row or the second row or the middle. I want it in the back of the room, just present. I don't want it to be distracting. So yeah, you go in the back of the room, you sit at the back. So this does that. This pushes it in the background with the wet dry knob. So if I wanted it, right now it's kind of in the middle of the room, it worked there for me. I think I had it full wet and it wasn't as present, so I brought it forward a bit. Most times I have it around 70, 60, maybe 40, around there. In this case, I had it around 40. This is the Reverb plugin in Pro Tools. You can use the Silver Verb in Logic. You know, just make sure that the dry wet is, you can set it around the midpoint. That usually works for most things, but for taste and depending on the type of song you're doing and how hard you want the effect to sound, you would soften it a bit with the wet dry mix. So I'm softening the delay to make it, push it in the background, right? The only other thing going on here is I have the high frequency cut set at around 11K because I don't want the in the delays. So I kind of cut that down a bit. And then I'm also using another bad boy, the black box. Imagine this plugin cost me like $250 for this one thing when I bought it, right? And today you guys got it for like $50 or something. So yeah, what a time to be alive. You guys have everything now for less, so go be great. This is a saturation plugin, and I am using this to give the delay more spunk, more vibe, make it more, a little bit more aggressive without being aggressive. So just a bit of saturation, you know. I didn't trouble anything here. Is the default setting. I'm not adding any air to it, nothing like that. Just basically adding a touch of saturation on the delay to give it a vibe. From there, I am going into, so all the music and everything is going into the NLS bus. I am trimming a bit because I don't want to go into it too hot to get the effect that I want. Now, what this does, this is the Waves nonlinear summing plugin. And what this does is it mimics an SSL board. It mimics kind of like a like them Midas, not Midas, like them Songcraft kind of boards, like I think. It's in the manual though, but and then this mimics obviously a Neve console. I tend to like the Neve console. It sounds clear, it sounds crisp, it adds a little bit of beef and weight, but not too much. So I will use this a lot on like my vocal. Sometimes I put it on the lead vocal track to give it a little bit more drive, a little bit more analog sound, you know. Sometimes I will use the mic if I want more bass in the voice, if I want more bass in the mix, you know, like R&B, that kind of stuff. I will use the mic. The spike is a little aggressive. It has a little more grit to it, like the SSL boards when you drive them. As you can see, they got a drive knob here. So I will use the spike when I want more dirt. I want things to be a little bit more grungy, you know, more rock like, you know, aggressive songs, aggressive music. I use that. Angry music, I use that. You know, more softer stuff, Nevo or mic, right? And all I'm doing here is adding some drive. Now on the SSL boards and stuff, when you drive the preamps, when you drive the console in the red and stuff like that, what happens is it starts to give you this effect of fatness, of being more punchy. The sound would pop through the speakers in your face, you know. So I use this on the entire mix, right? And I set it around 3/4. Most times it's around 3/4. So you have that, have fun with that. You know, you can always play the music and then bypass it to see how it sounds.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 no.
Even on the vocals, you can hear what it's doing to the vocals. Is bringing the vocals more in my face, you know, making it sound more better. Top. All right, so that's that. Then here I'm going into what I call my mix bus. Right, from that I'm going into here, and you see I got a separate track for everything. Even though I could put plugins on, like I have a lot of different spaces for the plugins, I like to create structure. And like this is my analog vibe, so I know that sounding like the analog boards. I have something called CJ Mix where I send it there first and then I send it to CJ Master. So what CJ Mix is doing is I have a again, an SSL modeled plugin using the SSL EQs and whatnot. But I mainly use this for the THD. Yeah, so secret sauce, guys. Awesome sauce. This is me sharing some of my awesome sauce in the mastering department. So THD, total harmonic distortion, is like another form of like saturation of sorts. And it just makes the music sound fatter. It makes it sound bigger. I think the default setting is be around maybe 60 or so. But I had this particular rhythm set at around 45, something around there. And that makes it sound a little bit beefier. So you could play with that as well. You're not going to be able to hear it how you're recording now. I just recording on my phone, so you're not really going to be able to hear it. The only other thing I'm doing, the EQ must be on for the THD to work. And what I'm doing on the EQ is at 16 kilohertz, 16,000 hertz. What I'm doing is a little touch, just a little touch, half a dB, barely even noticeable. But what it's doing for the entire mix is giving it this sheen, like a nice sheen on things, making it sound more expensive, the entire mix now. And then again on the bottom end, I'm doing nothing in the mids, nothing like that. On the end, I am adding 40 hertz, where my sub and my kick drum kind of live, part of my kick drum. I am adding a decibel there, plus 1 dBs, and that's giving me a little bit more oomph, in my chest, you know. You can feel the bass in your belly. So that's what's going on. From there, I heading into, see, I got another trim plugin. I always use trim plugins. In this particular case, I'm using it to reference. I think the reference that I was using, it wasn't as loud. It was just the mix. So the mix was like around 7 dBs lower than how the mastering would be when I was at the mixing stage. So I pulled it down to make sure that my mix sounds as good as that mix. So I would bypass this based on when I'm ready to master or not. So there's a trim plugin. It's not on, is it? It's not being used, it's bypassed. BXXL, this is another plugin from Brainworks, plugin alliance, and this is a mastering equalizer, so sorry, a mastering compressor. So what I'm doing is I am now mastering the whole rhythm song, and this has a nice feature called XL that I love. Now what XL does is it adds harmonics, back again to harmonics, right? Analog harmonics. So a lot of guys will say, Corey, you mix this song analog. How you getting the song to sound? How you getting to the song so? How you getting the computer to sound this way? Well, this is part of it. XL, right? Now, I usually have it around a setting of between maybe 15, 25, around 30. You know, I wanted this to be a little bit more aggressive, so I set it around 30-ish, right? And what that does is it turns out all of these, but I don't want to turn it all because I don't want it on the bass, because when bass gets harmonics, it kind of gets distorted. And the bass in this song, the actual tone that I used for this rhythm, it was already kind of distorted in a way to give it that aggressive feel, emotion. So I turned that completely off. That's not being used. It's basically a compressor that's only acting on the, it's a compressor limiter that's acting on the low end of things, the mids and the lows, the subs, the kick drum, the bass player, you know, the meat of the vocals, that kind of thing. But on the mids, what I'm doing, which is mostly going to touch the vocals and like some of the keyboards and stuff that are in the center of the mix, I'm adding around 30 XL on this, which is the same 30 that I heard. Because you can turn this off and then you can move these, but when you move global, it moves everything, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm adding a little bit of XL saturation. What it does is it gives me perceived loudness, so I can get my mixes louder than the average guy. So for you guys struggling with your mixes, trying to get them louder, trying to get them more in your face, this will help you, use XL. When I bought this plugin, it was probably around $400 or something like that. US. Or 300 US, somewhere around there. Today, I think you get it for like $100 or something like that. So yeah, enjoy that. Go test it out. I think there's a demo you can use to test it out before you buy it. This will help you guys. The only other thing I'm doing on the mid band where the vocals and thing are is boosting it a little bit. I felt like the bass was a little too strong and stuff in the instruments, so I kind of boosted the vocals a bit by probably like a dB. And usually subtle settings here is best. You're mastering now, so you don't want the settings to be high. If you find you gotta do at this stage, if you find you gotta do too much, go back in the mix and fix things, right? So usually in mastering, you want subtle settings like 0.7, 0.5, -1, that kind of thing. Here I added like around a dB of the vocals more to bring the vocals a little bit above the mix. I didn't want the music to bury the vocals, so I brought out the vocals a bit more. And this is the threshold of the compressor, basically when it starts to act, right? So
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 no. I don't.
it's a little delayed because of the delay compensation in Pro Tools, so it seems a little bit off time, but it's acting on Peter's voice mostly, and only on the peaks. It isn't constantly affecting it, only on like the peaks and stuff. But then I raising the overall volume of his voice as well, and everything else in the mix in that range of his voice, the mids, right? This is the sides. This is the extreme left, extreme right of the, if you go on headphones, and right. So what this basically does, there's where all the keyboards and the guitars and the effects and everything lives. Just adding a touch of perceived volume here, more loudness to bring them out to the sides of the speakers more, let them pop out of the speakers more, and boosting the overall volume of everything by 0.6 dBs. Very subtle. Here, there's a trick that I'm gonna show you guys that a lot of people don't know about or don't know how to use. It's called side chaining in mastering. So what's happening is that I'm feeding a little bit of the mid signal, the center of the mix, the vocals, the kick drum, the snare drum, and everything. I'm feeding that into the sides of the mix. So now the vocal, the kick drum, the snare drum is actually affecting the keyboards. It's grooving with the keyboards. So what this does in your mastering is normally there's a real device that does what this plugin does, right? And that is a secret that us mastering engineers use to kind of get your music to sound epic and feel epic. So thank me later. This is a tool that a lot of people don't know about, but I'm sharing it with you today. Happy mixing, happy mastering, have fun. Sidechain mix, what I'm doing is I'm feeding a little bit of the kick drum, snare drum into the sides of the mix, the keyboards, and as you can see, it's on the side. I can also put the side into the mids if I want, but for this song that wasn't necessary. For more songs, I'm putting the mid into the side, right? Feeding a little bit of that into the side. So I set that where I felt like it was pumping a bit. It sounded pretty good in the sides of the mix. And now my keyboards and my effects and everything that are panned basically are grooving with my kick drum and the bunks of the song, the rhythm. So that gives it more vibe. So you got people like dancing more and stuff, right?
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 no. I don't know why she.
It's very subtle, but it is felt more than heard. The only other thing I'm doing with this is I've also turned up the side. See the mid? This is the middle of the mix, the side of the mix. I'm turning up the side of the mix a bit more. Oh yeah. Plugin Alliance was merged with Native Instruments, so Native Instruments now works with Brainworks, yeah. So I'm turning up the side of the mix only by half a dB, only by a little bit, just a oomph. Sometimes I even have it at 0.2, right? 0.2 of a dB, which you can't really, much people can't hear 0.2 of a dB. Much people can't even hear 0.5 of the dB, but it's felt more than heard. And that's letting the keyboards and stuff pop out of the mix a little bit more in a pleasing way without getting it too washy. And from there, all I'm doing is limiting. Limiting is basically making everything louder so that when you hear it on the radio, it sounds just as loud as the Rihanna, it sounds just as loud as the Chris Brown, it sounds just as loud as the 50 Cent, the Barris Hammond, you know, the Brian McKnight. That's how you get your stuff loud. But I'm not just using one limiter, I'm using 3 limiters. Actually, I'm using 4 limiters on my master. So the BX-XL done a little bit of limiting, if any at all. Mostly the XL saturation from it, Harmonics. The L2 is bringing the level up to minus 0.1 dB.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 no. I don't know why she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You can see she fussy, she fussy, she fussy. You can
always watch the gain reduction / attenuation. And as you can see, I ain't knocking off 3, 4, 5, 6 dBs, decibels. I ain't knocking off barely 1 decibel, 1.5 decibels. Why? I'll tell you why. A lot of guys put one limiter on their master to get things loud, and then they just pull down the threshold or turn up the gain to make it loud. But it gets loud, but it gets distorted. Yes, it's as loud as the songs you hear on the radio when you reference, but you're losing punch, you're losing clarity, you're losing transients. Transients are like the sharp edges on the mix that make it sound more crispy, right? And more present to your ears. So you lose transients when you squash things too much with limiters. So I'm taking the long route. And I have this because I like how it sounds. The L2 sounds good. You can use your limiter in your program. The L2 gives me a nice vibe. And I'm using the FabFilter Pro L2. My good friend from New York, Kevin King, Bajan Sheriff, he gave me this plugin. Great guy. Very generous, very down-to-earth guy, you know. He gave me this plugin for free. He had a license, and I think it gives you 2 licenses, or he wasn't using it or something. And he's like, hey man, you want the Pro L2? I was like, yeah, sure, of course. I already done spent enough money in plugins, but that's one that I have my eye on. And he gave me this. And again, I'm doing 1.4 dBs here. So if you look at the gain reduction,
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 no. I don't know why she getting on. Happy, happy.
I barely doing a dB of gain. So that gain even louder by 1 decibel. That's like 1 notch on your radio volume knob. And then I turn it up again, another notch. Almost 2 notches. 1.7. If you check me. Sorry. Also, on the Pro L2, what's great about this limiter is it has modes. So I have styles. So I can have it sounding more aggressive, transparent, punchy, dynamic, all around, modern, safe. For this rhythm, I want it to be aggressive. So I used aggressive, right? And then we knocking off 1.4 to 1.6 on the second Pro L. Same thing again, another 1.6, 1.7 decibels. It might go a little bit higher because of the transients. Sometimes it might go to 2.5, sometimes 2, but generally for the most part it will stay around 1.7. It isn't always perfect. And then finally, there's another important step. I'm not dithering because in Pro Tools, dithering is like this computer thing that kind of shapes the overall sound of the things, noise shaping. I'm not using dithering in the limiter because when you export on Pro Tools, it automatically dithers. So that's off. If you're using Logic or another program that probably doesn't automatically do that, dithering, then you leave on the dithering. But I turned it off here. usually you would dither down to 16 bits, because I record at 24 bits. I record all the instruments and everything at 24 bits, 48 kilohertz. Sometimes I might use 88 or 96. It depends. If I get fuzz in 96, I work at 96. I found that plugins tend to operate a little better with higher sample rates. But if you guys are using 44, 16, cut it out. As Mia would say, cut it out. Step up to 48, 24 bit, right? So when you dither now, you're coming back to 16 bits, which is CD quality, which is still the standard, even though we don't use CDs anymore. When you hear music on iTunes, on the radio, is CD quality, right? And if I was sending this song to a movie or something, then I would send them at 24 bits or 32 bits if my software allows it, right? Because more headroom for them is important for them video guys. So having a higher sample rate for the video guys is pretty good. Plugins generally work at higher sample rates, but when you've done your mix and you're coming back down to send it to the station, to the radio, to CD, online, come back to 16. Pro Tools is going to do that for me automatically. And very important as well, the master out level. I don't ever leave it on 0, because sometimes the limiters don't catch everything perfectly. So I will bring this back generally to around minus 0.1 or minus 0.2. Right? Anywhere around there is good. It will still be hitting 0, but minus 0.2, which is a slight oomph under 0. So it never clips, it never distorts. Right? And last but not least, I have the free, this is free, the lean loudness meter. So this helps me determine how loud my mix is. And generally most songs on the radio, you'll find them between minus 10, minus 11, minus 9. If you're pushing it and you want to be a bad boy, basically you will go to minus 8, sometimes minus 7. But to achieve that, to achieve minus 7 and have...
I don't know why she getting on. Happy.
To achieve minus 7 and still the bass sound nice and clean, the vocals sound nice and clean, everything sound nice and clean and not distort, is a gift. Like, there are not many guys in the world that can do that successfully, especially for music that has a lot of low end and bass, like R&B and hip hop and soca and things like that, and reggae, right? You gotta feel that bass in effect. You don't really be able to get so loud, right? Or you just have to sacrifice the bass for something else, because the bass frequencies is push volume levels up faster than the higher frequencies, right? So remember that. So, but generally, to be safe, I usually stay around minus 9 LUFS, right? That's just the standard. LUFS is the standard for loudness in the world. And most songs that you hear on the radio from all the top artists and stuff can be around minus 7, minus 8, minus 9 LUFS, right? So I'm hitting that target. And then the true peak maximum, I'm never going above 0, so I will never distort.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, 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 happy. No, I don't know why she getting on. Happy, happy, but all I can see is that she fussy, she fussy. You go see she fussy.
And that's basically it. The only other thing I would show you guys that I probably missed is that sometimes I EQ my reverbs. So in the Mani reverb, it doesn't have a built-in, it has a built-in EQ, right? But I don't know exactly what I'm doing. It's just a knob. It's just telling me lows. It ain't telling me which frequency it is. It's just basically doing the math for me. But I don't know which math it's doing, so I'm not gonna trust it in this case. I'm gonna do it myself. I mean, if I read the manual, it might probably tell me what it is, but I ain't got time for that. So I EQing it myself. Mani, where are you? Right here. Right. And this is what I'm doing with that Mani reverb. I don't want the rumbling low end in the vocal reverb to make it sound washy and miserable. So I cutting out everything under 500 hertz. Sometimes I'm around 200, 300. In this particular song, it felt good to me at 500. So I put it there. And then hardly anything above 3K. 3000 hertz, 3 kilohertz. So that's a high cut filter or a low pass filter at around 3K. And as you can see, the curve kind of coming down, it touching 5K. So a little bit of this getting through, but not much. So that's it. And that's cleaning up my reverb and making it sound nice and crispy and cozy and sweet. And there you have it. That's it. Another thing that I missed was after the THD from the SSL console, the SSL 4000, I'm going into a tape. Now what the tape is doing is kind of softening my mix. Any harshness in my mix is kind of taming that a bit. As you can see, the preset that I'm using, this is when I actually use the preset. Mastering, clean and open. But when I turn that on, I am turning off the noise. Very important, guys. If not, you hear this. Hiss. You will get the hiss in the song. You don't want that. You'd be like, wait, I hear a hiss in my song. Well, analog gear does this. Sometimes you plug it into the wall and you get this. A little bit of hiss. Sometimes you could get away with it. Sometimes it's a little too loud. But when the music is playing, you might not hear it. It's just an effect. I don't need it. It ain't doing nothing. So I turned that off. Clean and preset. Clean and open is at 15 IPS. Is allowing the transients and stuff and the high end to come through. It's Soca. So yeah, it's happy. High end is good. If I was doing a darker kind of song, sad song, whatever, I might put it at 7.5. It tames the top end of the song, the mix, makes it a little darker, you know, emotionally, right? So 15 works for me. The bias is normal. Sometimes I might use over, depending on how it feels. And then my gain staging coming into this plugin.
I don't know why she getting on. Happy, no. I don't.
I'm hitting it pretty hard, right? The input here, I have it pushed. The recording level, which is the input to the tape thing, head or whatever, and then the playback level is the output from the tape machine. So then I compensate for that coming out before I go into my limiters, right? So I'm slamming it. Why I'm slamming it so hard is because it's giving me some grit as well, which I like. It's giving me some analog magic that I like in the computer, right? So that's that. And there you have it. Happy mixing. Create some great songs, create some great music, make it some top notch. If you can make it some top notch or you ain't got the time, hit me up and it will make you some top notch. All right, have a great day and take care, guys. Until next time, Starway out.